Bear down, fam. Put the phone down for a second, because what's coming today has my jaw on the floor. Stefon Diggs, the $124 million receiver out of Buffalo, the guy who almost walked away with a ring with the Patriots last season, the guy who just walked out of a courtroom clean a month and a half ago, is buzzing in Chicago and Kansas City at the exact same time. I'm about to break down exactly why the Bears could be the most logical landing spot, and why the Chiefs, even though they need him more, probably can't afford him. After that, ESPN dropped their 2026 quarterback rankings, and Caleb Williams cracked the top 10. Listen to this, ahead of Jaden Daniels. I'm going to explain exactly why league executives voted that way, and the ugly stat that almost knocked him off the list entirely. And to close it out, Ryan Poles told Joey Bosa, no, the pass rusher the national media keeps pushing straight to Halas Hall. And honestly, after watching what happened with Dayo Odeyingbo, the last edge rusher Poles handed $48 million to, I get why. All of that right now. Let's dive in. Okay, bro, let's talk about Stefon Diggs, because this week his name got tied up in rumors involving two teams at once, and I want you to understand the full story before jumping to conclusions. Let's start at the beginning. Diggs entered the league as a fifth-round pick back in 2015. Nobody was betting big on him in that draft. He spent his first 5 years with the Vikings, produced well, signed a 5-year extension worth $72 million, and even so, the relationship with that organization broke down. Minnesota traded him to the Bills in 2020 for a package of picks that included a first-rounder. That was a massive signal that Buffalo was willing to bet everything on him, and that bet paid off. Diggs exploded immediately. His first season with the Bills ended with league-leading numbers: 127 receptions, 1,535 yards, 8 touchdowns. In 2021, he added 10 touchdowns during the first ever 17-game season in NFL history. He became, without exaggeration, one of the 3 or 4 most consistent receivers in football for 4 straight years alongside Josh Allen. And here's the number that gives this segment its title. In 2022, Buffalo gave him a 4-year extension. The total value of that deal, combined with what was left on the prior agreement, came out to $124.1 million. $124 million. That's the number any reporter covering his career reaches for as shorthand, and it's also why this block carries that title. But football doesn't forgive time, and organizations don't forgive an uncomfortable cap sheet either. In 2024, Buffalo traded him to the Houston Texans for a second-round pick. Diggs didn't stay there long either. He tore his ACL in October of that year, playing for the Texans, and finished the season on the bench. Then 2025 arrives, and this is where the story genuinely gets admirable. Diggs signed with the Patriots in New England on a 3-year deal worth $63.5 million, basically a prove-it contract, and he proved it. 85 receptions, 1013 yards, 4 touchdowns, and the Patriots ended the season playing in the Super Bowl. They didn't win it, but they got there. And a big part of why they got there was Diggs being the top option for Drake May, a young quarterback who was just finding his rhythm. Hang on to that phrase, because it's about to matter in a minute. Mentor to a young quarterback in his first real breakout year. And then, this past March, the Patriots released him. It wasn't performance. It was pure cap space math, because they were about to bring in A.J. Brown via trade, and there wasn't room for both receivers. That's the pattern with this guy. He produces, and they still let him go over the numbers, not the talent. Now, the uncomfortable part of this story, and I'm going to tell it with the seriousness it deserves. Last December, while he was still playing for the Patriots, Diggs was accused of assault and strangulation by his former personal chef. It was a serious case. It went to trial, and this past May, a jury found him not guilty on every charge. The league also reviewed the case under its personal conduct policy and concluded there wasn't enough evidence to hand down a suspension. Legally, Diggs is clean, and he can play in 2026 with no restrictions. So where's he now? No team. 32 years old, about to turn 33 in November, and 2 specific teams are buzzing hard to land him: the Chicago Bears and the Kansas City Chiefs. Watch how this connects to what the Bears already did this offseason, because it's not a coincidence. Chicago traded DJ Moore to the Buffalo Bills earlier this year for a second-round pick and a 5th. Yes, you heard that right. The Bears no longer have Moore. That trade left Chicago with a receiver room built around young players. Rome Odunze heading into his 3rd season, Luther Burden III gearing up for year 2 after that closing stretch that's got everybody hyped. Behind them, the roster has role players like Calif Raymond and Scotty Miller, plus developing prospects. It's a room with a high ceiling, but not a lot of real playoff mileage. And that's exactly where Sports Illustrated's Gilberto Manzano put his finger this week. He said the Bears are the best available landing spot for Diggs. His argument, in short, is that Chicago needs somebody with real experience after losing Moore, and that the mentor dynamic with a young quarterback, the same one Diggs had last year with Drake May, translates perfectly to what Caleb Williams needs in year 3. Now, the other suitor, and this is where the analysis actually gets interesting: Kansas City. The Chiefs have a receiver problem they've been unable to solve for months. Rashee Rice keeps running into legal trouble, so much that right now he's serving 30 days in jail for violating probation, and the organization hasn't even wanted to commit to extending him. Xavier Worthy, their other first-round receiver, still hasn't topped 650 yards in a full season. And Travis Kelce is already in the final stretch of his career, no longer the high-volume option he was for a decade. So, yes, on paper, Kansas City needs Diggs more than the Bears do. The question is whether they can afford him. And here's the number that changes the whole analysis. The Chiefs entered this summer with only $4.12 million in cap space, the second worst total in the entire league. We're not talking about a team that can just write a $20 million a year check. Market projections for Diggs run somewhere between $13 and $27 million a year, depending on who you ask. And honestly, that range already knocks Kansas City out of competing on equal footing. The Bears, on the other hand, don't need Diggs to be their number one receiver. They need him as a WR3, as insurance in case Burden or Odunze get hurt, as a locker room voice for a young receiver group that hasn't lived through a full playoff run yet. That role costs a lot less than the savior role he'd need to fill in Kansas City. And on a roster that Ryan Poles is still building around Caleb Williams' contract, that relative savings actually matters. Let me give you my conditional prediction here, because this is exactly the kind of situation where I don't like speaking in absolutes. If Kansas City fails to clear more cap room in the coming weeks, and if Rice's legal situation gets worse with another league sanction, Diggs ends up signing with Chicago on a one-year deal, something close to $10 million, with a chance to earn more in incentives if he hits 1,000 yards. That's my read. I could be wrong. I've had free agency predictions fall apart on me before, but the financial signals are pointing pretty clearly in one direction. And notice something else here, because it connects directly to what this channel is about. There are legitimate concerns about bringing someone with this recent illegal history into a locker room that Ben Johnson is trying to build with discipline and zero tolerance for outside drama. That's the real risk, beyond the talent. It's not a small issue, and any fan who ignores it is only seeing half the equation. And watch how this connects directly to what we just talked about. Because if Chicago is going to convince a receiver of this caliber to sign for a secondary role, it needs to show him there's a real quarterback throwing him the ball. And this week, ESPN handed them that sales pitch on a silver platter. The network released its ranking of the league's top 10 quarterbacks for 2026, voted on by coaches, executives, and scouts across the NFL. Caleb Williams landed at number 10. Listen close. In the 2025 ranking, he didn't even show up. From not making the list at all to cracking the top 10 in football in a single season, that alone is a story. But the part that genuinely has me hyped is how he got there. ESPN openly admitted there was a technical tie between 4 quarterbacks for that last spot. Williams, Seattle's Sam Darnold, Green Bay's Jordan Love, and Washington's Jaden Daniels. They had to go to a tiebreaker, pulling input directly from general managers and executives, and Williams won. He beat out Jaden Daniels, the same Daniels coming off a spectacular year with the Commanders. That's not a small detail, fam. That's the entire league saying this kid has something the other 3 don't. And what reason did the executives give? That he's the hardest of the 4 to prepare for and defend. One general manager they talked to described him as the most dynamic of the group, with the arm talent and athleticism built for today's game. And the numbers back that reputation up. Williams threw 11 touchdown passes, 20 yards or deeper downfield, 2 more than any other quarterback in the league in 2025. 11. That's a player who isn't afraid to push it downfield, who trusts his arm in moments where other quarterbacks play it safe. He also cut his total sacks, taken from 68 down to 24 between his rookie year and his second season. 68 to 24, fam. That drop isn't luck. That drop is mental processing improving in real time. That's a quarterback who stopped standing around waiting for the play to open up on its own and started feeling the pressure before it arrives. And his 13 interceptions on 1,130 career pass attempts is an excellent rate by any league standard. One of the personnel evaluators ESPN talked to called him a closer, said that at the end of games, Williams has shown he answers the bell. And the numbers back it up. His 6 fourth-quarter comebacks in 2025 led the entire NFL. 6. No other quarterback had more. That's the kind of stat that separates quarterbacks who pile up yards from the ones who actually win games when the scoreboard says otherwise. Now, let's be honest, because this channel doesn't exist to run free advertising for anybody. ESPN was also brutal on the flip side. His off-target rate was 20.2%, 37th out of 38 qualified quarterbacks, 37th of 38. That's basically the worst accuracy in the league. One veteran defensive coach described him with a phrase that stuck with me, wildly erratic. Said he still doesn't always take the easy completions, that he needs to mature, that he has those plays where you ask yourself what he's doing. But that same coach admitted he also makes plays only he and Mahomes can make. And there's the perfect summary of who Caleb Williams is at this point in his career. a player of extremely high peaks and genuinely frustrating valleys. And the real question for 2026 isn't whether he has the talent, that's already settled. The question is whether he can raise that 58% completion rate from last year without losing the improvisation that makes him unique. The Bears themselves have already flagged this as the quarterback's #1 priority for this season. My honest opinion, and this is genuinely what I think, if Williams raises that completion percentage even to 62 or 63% while keeping the volume of explosive plays, this kid finishes the year as a top 5 quarterback in the league, not top 10. The ceiling is right there. The question is whether Ben Johnson can polish the consistency without shutting off the instinct. And that, fam, might be the most important story of the Bears' entire 2026 season. And this connects to what we need to talk about on the defensive line, because if Chicago is going to build a real contending roster with a top 10 quarterback and potentially a receiver with a ring nearly in hand, the pass rush is still the hole nobody's patched. Fansite had put out a list this week of the league's most underrated free agents with a suggested ideal landing spot for each one. And the name they handed the Bears was Joey Bosa, a veteran edge rusher, a 5-time Pro Bowler who came up through Los Angeles and Buffalo. Fansited's Winston Wilcox made the argument directly. He said Bosa would be the perfect second pass rusher behind Montez Sweat, that Sweat still has juice left but needs a running mate, and that the Bears could improve on defense while they keep waiting on Max Crosby at the trade deadline. Now look, I get the argument on paper. A veteran of that caliber on a short-term deal, solving a real quarterback pressure problem that dragged this defense down last season, sounds perfect in a fan-sided column. But here's my problem with this suggestion, and I'll say it with the same honesty this channel has always had. Poles has already made it crystal clear, through actions and not words, that he's rolling with the group he has. He didn't touch the position in the trade window, didn't sign anyone at that spot in free agency, and didn't draft one either. When a general manager doesn't touch a position through any of the 3 available windows, that's a statement of intent, not an oversight. Instead, Poles is betting big on Austin Booker and on Dayo Odeyingbo to solve the pass rush internally. And here we have to get critical about the actual numbers because expectations and reality aren't lining up. Booker showed genuine flashes, 4.5 sacks in just 10 games, a production rate that, if it holds over 16 games, actually moves the needle. But Odeyingbo is the part that genuinely worries me, and this connects to a pattern we've already flagged on this channel before. Poles handed Odeyingbo $48 million over 3 years last offseason, and the result was a single sack in 8 games. 1. After $48 million guaranteed. That, fam, is exactly the kind of medical bet and projection gamble that's cost this front office before. This isn't the first time Poles has invested heavily in a player with an injury history and ended up watching that money not translate into production on the field. And now on top of that, Bosa has his own fragility history, which honestly is the main reason I don't think Poles even sits down to negotiate. Reports over the last few weeks suggest Bosa isn't even in a rush to get back on the field. You start to wonder if he's genuinely considering retirement. My honest read on this situation, Chicago sticks with what it has until the October trade deadline, exactly what Fansited's own article suggests, but not because they're satisfied, it's because they've already spent the financial and roster capital on this internal bet and need to see it through before admitting they got it wrong. If Booker and Odeyingbo aren't producing consistent pressure by week 8 or 9, that's when the Max Crosby conversation gets real, and not before. And there you have it, fam. A possible signing that could redefine this team's receiver depth, a quarterback the entire league just recognized as a top 10 talent while carrying the ugliest accuracy stat in football. And a general manager still betting his entire credibility on 2 internal players solving a problem a free agent on the open market could fix faster. This team is 1 season away from deciding whether Ben Johnson and Ryan Poles built something sustainable or whether they just bought Caleb Williams some time. Me, honestly, I think we're closer to the first one than the second. But like I always say on this channel, I could be wrong. Bear down, always. Tell me down below, no filter. Would you sign Diggs with that recent illegal history, even if he walked out of court clean, or should Chicago stay far away from that risk? I want to read every single opinion. Hit like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.